The body of a man was unexpectedly discovered in a quarry, carrying evidence that could directly connect to a kidnapping that had been forgotten for decades. Forensic results showed the victim had been shot in the head, but the Pirie inadvertently preserved his hands, allowing police to obtain a complete set of fingerprints. This seemingly small clue immediately led to the first breakthrough in the case. However, the further the police followed the trail, the more they realized the deceased might be holding a secret powerful enough to overturn the entire truth of the past. A sudden, violent storm not only submerged many areas, but also swept away a set of human remains in a rocky outcrop. Police found car keys on the body. This immediately brought to light the kidnapping of the Grant mother and son, a case that shocked the nation 40 years earlier. In 1984, Catriona, the heiress of an oil tycoon, was chatting with a close friend at a restaurant with her 2-year-old son, Adam. After the conversation ended, she had just put her child in the car when suddenly a cold gun was pointed directly at her head. The terrified child burst into tears in the car. Catriona's best friend heard the crying and immediately turned around. But in the end, both were still overpowered and taken away by the kidnappers. Bonnie's desperate screams and the screeching of the car tires became the only vivid memories remaining at the scene that year. Due to the victim's family's status, the case immediately caused a frenzied media frenzy and attracted immense public attention. Not long after, the Grant family received a ransom demand from the kidnappers, but strangely, just before the night of the ransom, they completely disappeared. Catriona and her son also vanished. The police investigation, lacking clues, stalled, becoming one of the most hopeless cases of the time. However, the male body discovered in the quarry concealed evidence directly related to the kidnapping years ago. This cold, impassioned case finally began to crack. At this point, Officer Karen had been promoted to inspector, but a more powerful position also meant heavier responsibilities. A more complex political environment and harsher challenges awaited her. After taking on the case, she immediately assembled a core investigative team consisting of Jason, often considered lazy but sincere and trustworthy, who specialized in reconstructing the details of the case using advanced investigative technology. Phil, who had a vague romantic relationship with Karen, took on the role of meticulously piecing together clues with a cold, calculating mind. The investigation by the three officially began. The forensic report indicated the victim died from a gunshot wound to the head. Thanks to the peat layer that preserved the hands, the police were able to piece together a set of fingerprints. After comparison, they identified the victim as Kevin, who died in his early 20s. He had a criminal record for assault, drug possession, and gang involvement. Therefore, it can be inferred that this was an organized crime with the purpose of extortion. His shooting death may be related to an internal purge. Karen assigned Phil to investigate Kevin's friends or relatives. Jason was in charge of searching for where Catriona and Adam had been held captive and verifying whether there were any witnesses on the night of the crime. She then visited the Grant family mansion. 40 years had passed, and unexpectedly, a clue to Catriona's kidnapping finally emerged. Images of his daughter and grandson flashed through Grant's mind. His voice trembled, unable to hide the profound pain in his heart. For years, he had always wanted to believe they were still alive. Although the case had been cleared, he still didn't want to put his trust in the police again. That year, when he received the threatening letter from the kidnappers, they demanded that he absolutely not let the media know about Catriona and Adam's kidnapping. Otherwise, the ransom would increase. Secondly, they demanded 100 old pounds, divided into 2 bags, to be delivered to a designated location within 3 days. After confirming the amount was correct, they would release Adam first, then return Catriona. Mr. Grant immediately declared that money was not an issue. However, the police maintained a firm stance, arguing that the UK's hostage negotiation policy did not accept the other party's demands. The police deployed forces around Grant's castle, preparing to arrest the kidnappers during the transaction. Unexpectedly, they fell into a trap. The person in the motorcycle was not the kidnapper. The real kidnappers sent a second threatening letter to Bonnie's house. The police operation failed, leaving the Grants distraught. The police chief reassured them that an investigation had been launched into the registered Scottish Anarchist Alliance, and they quickly identified a suspect. This person had studied with Catriona at the Art Academy. Therefore, the police quickly proceeded to arrest him. But after questioning, it was discovered they had arrested the wrong person. He and Catriona had only met once and had no connection whatsoever. Yet when he heard that the kidnappers had been toying with the police and abducting the Grant family, he clapped and laughed. So, was this case ultimately related to him? Mr. Grant was wealthy, but because of police intervention, he was unable to save his daughter and granddaughter. Therefore, he regretted believing the police's promise all those years ago. Later, Karen met with Mrs. Grant. The pain of losing a loved one meant that although the couple couldn't maintain their marriage, they couldn't leave each other. Mrs. Grant always believed her daughter was still alive and kept all of her daughter's belongings in the bedroom, including witness information that the police had collected. This could be of great help to the case. Therefore, Karen offered to take all these items to the police station. No one but the mother had devoted so much effort to the case. For 40 years, she asked the police every day if there were any new clues. This also put considerable pressure on the investigating force, which was completely at a standstill. The police had questioned Adam's biological father and learned that Catriona's love life was extremely complicated. He was the child's father, but he had never met the child because his relationship with Catriona was an extramarital affair. Unexpectedly, a momentary lapse in judgment led to her pregnancy. Sinclair worked at Grant's company. Strangely, despite the incident with the boss's daughter, he was not fired. Grant was a businessman, and Sinclair was very good at business. Later, the police questioned Bonnie a few more times and learned that that night, while they were having dinner at the restaurant, Catriona had temporarily gone outside to make a phone call. Tracing the call history showed that the number was from a public telephone booth. Karen's suspicions regarding the case included, firstly, how the kidnappers knew Catriona and Adam's location. Was she being followed, or had someone leaked the information? Secondly, why was the call made from a public phone booth, and who was waiting for her call? At the same time, Jason called to report that he had identified the location where Catriona and Adam were kidnapped. He had previously investigated houses near the quarry for witnesses and found that only one house had no owner. This immediately caught his attention, so Karen decided to go and investigate in person. Upon arrival, she discovered the house had been sealed. The wallpaper on the walls was identical to the wallpaper in Catriona's photo. The police quickly conducted an examination, and the results showed that this was one of the crime scenes from that year. Catriona and Adam had been secretly taken to this house by the kidnappers. As a mother, Catriona would rather die than let her son be harmed. She mustered the courage to ask the kidnappers to bring diapers and baby food. Phil had recently learned that Kevin had an older brother named Ryan, a member of a criminal family. He had a criminal record related to drugs and weapons. But after 2021, he suddenly disappeared. There were rumors that he had now become a police officer, betraying his drug-dealing family. Finding him could reveal the details of the Grant case. However, his identity as a witness was under protection, making him vulnerable to danger. Therefore, her superiors warned Karen not to break the rules. She agreed, but inwardly she wouldn't overlook any suspicious points. She assigned this task to Phil and asked him to secretly track Ryan's whereabouts. Initially, Phil was reluctant. If his location were revealed, his life would be in danger. Karen said Kevin had been shot in the head, so they absolutely had to find the person who did it. But Phil said he didn't want to put anyone in danger. She said of course, but it was their job. They had to find out as much truth as possible. At the same time, the staff discovered a crucial clue in Catriona's sketchbook. Inside were many close-up drawings of hands. Based on the tattoos on the hands, they could determine that they all belonged to the same person. But among the people they knew, none resembled the person in the drawings. So this must be someone else very close to Catriona. Kat quickly sought out Bonnie. Since Catriona's disappearance, Bonnie had become heavily addicted to alcohol. Now she needed to have work on her plate to concentrate. Karen asked Bonnie if she had ever seen the hands in the drawings. Did Catriona have a boyfriend at the time? But Bonnie had no idea. One evening, Catriona was in a very bad mood, so Bonnie took her to a bar to drink and drown her sorrows. Midway through the night, Bonnie became intimate with another man. Catriona didn't want to disturb them, so she went outside the bar alone to get some fresh air. It was there that she met a man. Their first meeting was very pleasant, and they quickly drove away from the bar. Just as Bonnie stepped out, she saw Catriona leaving. However, she had no idea who the man was. Catriona never mentioned his name afterward. Bonnie simply assumed it wasn't a serious relationship. But after seeing these drawings, she believed Catriona was definitely hiding something. Catriona was certainly in love with the man in the drawings, but after the media reported on it, why hadn't this man appeared? After that unexpected sweet moment, Catriona noticed the man was wearing a wedding ring. Because she herself had experienced infidelity, she was very concerned about this. The man explained that his relationship with his wife had ended a long time ago. His wife was with another man. Catriona also frankly told him she was pregnant. Under the man's sweet words, the two gradually understood each other better. Jason investigated and found out out that the small house belonged to a woman named Angie. After his brother Andy died, Angie tried to claim the house. The problem was that Andy's death occurred after the kidnapping. Angie absolutely couldn't believe that his brother was involved in the kidnapping. As far as he knew, Andy didn't have any tattoos. But Andy did know Kevin. It was because of Kevin that Andy got involved in gambling. Andy used to work at the vegetable market. At that time, the government was undermining workers' rights and closing coal mines, leaving tens of thousands of miners unemployed. Because of a lack of money, he wanted to sell his house, but the economic situation was so bad that he couldn't sell it. Kevin advised him to gamble in the hope of changing his life. Ryan lent Andy a lot of money at high interest rates. If the debt wasn't repaid, not only would Andy be in trouble, but Kevin would also be implicated. At the time, Angie was away studying, so she only knew that Andy had left a letter before jumping off a cliff. However, the police only found his bicycle on the beach, and no body. This made Karen realize that Andy might not be dead. Meanwhile, Phil found Ryan's ex-wife and obtained his phone number. But Ryan didn't answer calls or reply to messages. So how could they find Ryan? Karen came up with an idea. Secretly leak Kevin's name to the media to force Ryan to come forward. But her superiors would definitely not allow this. From the moment the case was assigned to Karen, the leadership had emphasized the need for absolute secrecy. Therefore, Phil and Karen had a fierce argument, but she still decided to reveal the information to blogger Bella, who had become an influential reporter. Very quickly, he published the news. The shocking case once again came back into the public eye, triggering a new media storm. No one knew that Karen's actions not only led to a criminal case, but also gradually uncovered a power struggle spanning 40 years. That morning, they knocked door to door, believing clues could come from anywhere. Even the ground could speak. By the end of the day, they would do everything they could. They couldn't let Alicia's project be jeopardized. Because Andy had been one of the workers who participated in the strike that year, and Catriona designed posters for charity fundraising events, the investigative team searched through all the original footage of these events in the video archives, hoping to find images of Catriona and Andy together. Unexpectedly, they did find Catriona. But the man with her at the time wasn't Andy. Soon after, Kevin and Andy appeared in the video. Were they tracking Catriona? Andy, in his desperation, had already learned Catriona's true identity. She was the daughter of Grant, who had replaced coal with oil, leading to the closure of coal mines and the destruction of workers' livelihoods. Therefore, he had to pay the price. So, who was the man with Catriona? After the news about Kevin aired, Ryan indeed appeared. To protect him, the police had given him a new identity. This meeting was extremely risky for Ryan, as the criminal organization was incredibly dangerous. While alive, Kevin always wanted to leave the organization, so accumulating money was his only option. But he didn't know that his younger brother would lose his life because of it. Besides Andy, Kevin's accomplice was another person, Catriona's boyfriend, Mick. The case finally had a crucial clue. But unexpectedly, a turn of events occurred. Karen's house was unexpectedly broken into. Besides her work laptop and keypad, nothing else was stolen. Clearly, someone was obstructing their investigation. So who was it? Bella was extremely worried and decided to report it to the police. But Karen disagreed. Although she was also very uneasy, this simultaneously proved that their investigation was on the right track. What kind of person was Catriona's boyfriend, Mick? 40 years ago, Catriona had asked Mick if he knew her true identity. He replied that he didn't. She then told him that she had been kidnapped. But now that she had him, she felt protected. As a woman deeply in love, she had never suspected the deadly danger posed by the person beside her. The investigation revealed that both Andy and Mick had worked at the vegetable market. When Kevin was shot dead, Andy was presumed dead, but his body was never found. Mick, on the other hand, was a master of seducing women. Therefore, he was the person the police had to find. Strangely, Mick had no registration records whatsoever. They couldn't find his death certificate either. The only thing they could investigate was a marriage certificate from 1981. In 1984, almost the entire town depended on coal mining for their livelihood. The closure of the coal mine led to mass unemployment among the miners. Life was incredibly miserable. The only way for the people to resist capitalism was to strike. But in reality, it was completely useless. In desperation, Andy decided to leave a letter for his sister and then die. Mick and Andy were close friends. Mick had devised a way to change the situation. Karen sought out the wife listed on Mick's marriage certificate. Jenny hadn't seen Mick in 40 years. That year, he only left a piece of paper and disappeared. He had long known she was with Tom, so he decided to leave. What she knew was that he had once led some people to work at a coal mine in another town. town. They lost contact after that. From Tom, they obtained a list of the divers who had left with Mick. After inquiring, they learned that Mick hadn't shown up on the night they decided to depart. A few months later, he had sent Jenny a large sum of money, and the postmark on the envelope indicated it was from France. At the same time, forensic experts discovered a crucial clue on Kevin's body. In the crevices of his shoes, there was a very distinctive type of mud. Its origin could be traced back to the beach on the east coast. He had been swept away by the water from that very spot. It was different from the peat found where his body was discovered. The second clue was something partially decayed in Kevin's pocket. After expert examination, it was discovered to be a passport. The name on it wasn't Kevin, but the photo was indeed his. Therefore, it was a fake passport. Karen believed that Mick and Andy had also changed identities. This increased the difficulty of solving the case, because they could be anyone, anywhere. Karen told Jason to contact a portrait artist to use their childhood photos to create a composite, aged image. At the same time, Karen told Phil to investigate how they obtained the passports. What she suspected most was where they got so much money. Mr. Grant had been prevented from paying the ransom by the police, so the transaction had never been successful. Could they have taken the money from Catriona's personal account? But after investigating, they unexpectedly discovered that she actually had almost no money. Financial reports showed that her father hadn't given her any money. Karen couldn't help but suspect that these three kidnappers were hired by someone, and the person with the biggest motive and the most money was Adam's biological father, Sinclair. He had never considered himself Adam's father, and therefore didn't care about the lives of Adam and his mother. Karen asked him what he thought had happened to Catriona. He said both of them were dead. Both of them had disappeared. Everyone knew that was the most likely outcome. His answer was cold and decisive. Karen continued to press him, deliberately trying to provoke him into revealing a weakness. Then, Karen recalled a consultation meeting announced by a reporter who had followed the case 40 years earlier. At that meeting, the Grants had pushed the police chief aside and declared to the media that they would offer a huge reward to anyone who provided details related to the case. Despite their wealth, they were just grieving parents at the time. They were in extreme pain. Later, the police used this as an excuse to push the police chief out of the case. At the same time, Phil found the person who had forged documents for Kevin and his gang. She had helped the gang launder money and was currently serving a sentence. This kind of person is very difficult to deal with. Therefore, Karen quickly grasped her weakness. Karen's son was in a different prison and living a miserable life. So Karen transferred her son to another prison early on. She immediately confessed everything and admitted that she made the fake passports. Kevin had asked her to make 3 passports, but the person who came to pick up the passports later was Andy. He even asked her to make 2 more passports, which were in the names of Catriona and Adam. Karen went to the house where the kidnapping had taken place. Forensic experts found many bloodstains in the house that matched Kevin's DNA, but not Catriona's or Adam's. More importantly, the bullet that killed Kevin was embedded in the wall. This gun had been seen in many gang killings in the early 1980s. This could prove that Kevin took the gun from the gang and was ultimately shot dead by that very gun. Before he died at this location, there had been a violent struggle. His cheekbone was broken. There was blood and cells under his fingernails. The shooting distance was about 1 meter. The angle of the shot was approximately 140 centimeters, and the angle increased by another 28 degrees. Therefore, the height of the shooter was probably roughly the same as Catriona's. Could she have killed him, or was it self-defense? That year she was kidnapped, but based on the fingerprints found in the house, she was able to move freely. Shortly after, the kidnappers even prepared additional passports for themselves. If Catriona is still alive, why didn't she go home? Karen believes it wasn't self-defense at all, but murder, and she probably participated in the kidnapping as well. So what exactly happened that year? Andy was the one who insisted on involving Kevin in this case. As a friend, he wanted to help Kevin. He said he could throw the dirtiest tasks at Kevin, but Mick didn't trust Kevin. Mick agreed, but he couldn't tell Kevin all the details. That night, Kevin kidnapped Catriona and Adam. Mick told Kevin to go home and rest, then he went somewhere to create an alibi for himself. Then Mick took the gun from Kevin's hand. Catriona saw Mick and rushed towards him, furious, because when Kevin kidnapped her, he had a handgun. Mick hadn't cared about her and Adam's safety. This wasn't part of the plan. Mick explained that now the gun was on him, there would be no more mistakes. If anything went wrong, everyone would suffer the consequences. He didn't know that Kevin had overheard everything. Kevin felt cheated and was furious. He confronted Mick. All the dirty work was his doing. This made him feel like an idiot. The two men started fighting. Kevin threatened to expose their plan. He would tell Catriona's father everything. They could still get the money anyway. At that moment, Andy arrived home and learned that something big had happened. Kevin's brother was a gang member. Once discovered, they would be in serious trouble. Andy and Mick were left with no choice but to dispose of the body. So why did Catriona want to be the one to kidnap her? What was the problem between her and her father? Karen, harboring these questions, went to see Mr. Grant to find out about their relationship. It turned out Catriona was extremely resentful that her father hadn't fired the man who had impregnated her. She felt deeply betrayed. Grant only cared about his career and never understood his daughter's feelings. Their father-daughter relationship had become increasingly distant. She even refused to take money from her family. Therefore, she participated in her own kidnapping, including her boyfriend Mick, a former striking worker at her father's mine. It was all to punish her father. She intended to get the money and start a new life. But a mistake occurred in the process. Now the evidence the police have shows that Catriona was the one who killed Kevin. After Grant saw the news about Kevin's body, he also considered this theory, but he didn't want to believe it. If this wasn't a kidnapping, there was no reason to continue the investigation. He wanted the police to stop because once the public knew the truth behind the kidnapping, it would be a great humiliation for them. But Karen said no. The accusations might have changed, but the urgency remained the same. Adam was still the victim, and Catriona wasn't the suspect. As the investigation deepened, new clues gradually became clearer. When Jason reviewed witness accounts in France, he discovered that in 1984, a British tourist had seen a boy on the beach who looked very much like Adam. Checking nearby surveillance footage showed the man accompanying him looked very much like Mick. The new officer looked at the map and suddenly an idea flashed through his mind. He suddenly remembered that Andy had been a gambling addict. If they had money, how could they not go to casinos? And casinos keep records of big winners, cheaters, or troublemakers. Meanwhile, forensic experts, tracing the muddy soil in the boots, identified an address Kevin had visited before his death. Karen's intuition told her this location was crucial to the case. She studied the cave and knew that in 1984, before its collapse, there had been an escape route at the back. This could be part of his escape plan. After analyzing the data using scanning equipment, they created a 3D map of the cave, proving that a large-scale rock collapse had occurred inside. Something else seemed to be hidden within the rubble. Unexpectedly, at this very moment, the Grants invited the media for interviews and revealed the conclusions of their investigation. In front of the public, they declared their belief that their daughter had participated in her own kidnapping to extort money and punish the family. They were deeply ashamed. To compensate for the money the police and the public had wasted over the years, they decided to reimburse the police for all the investigative costs incurred on this case over the past 40 years. They requested that the police cease further investigation and allow the family to handle the matter quietly. Media pressure gave Karen a bad feeling, but she didn't expect her superiors to order her to continue the investigation. Although he disliked her work style, he absolutely forbade outsiders from directing them on what to do. The order for Karen was to solve the case. So why did Mr. Grant want the police to close the case so badly? Then something even more perplexing happened. Phil found the intruder who broke into Karen's house that night. At first, he didn't know who hired him, but when delivering the goods, he overheard the caller mentioning Mr. Sinclair. So what exactly did this have to do with Sinclair? Jason received information from a casino. After reviewing the simulated aging photos, they recognized one of the people in them. This man, who had previously caused a disturbance in a casino while drunk, was now using the name Mattia. Further investigation revealed that a man named Daniel had bailed Mattia out at the police station. Daniel had a son named Gabriel, whose age was believed to be similar to Adam's. Gabriel had repeatedly rescued migrants crossing the border near the Sicilian coast, leading to his arrest by the police. They suspected Gabriel was Adam, so Jason contacted the Sicilian police. At the same time, the forensic team made a heartbreaking discovery. Karen immediately went to the scene. A body lay on the ground. A watch engraved with the words, "To Catriona," was found. So what was the cause of Catriona's death, and what had her son Adam gone through all these years? The Grants were devastated by the news of their daughter's death, but they chose to remain silent. The forensic team concluded that Catriona had been shot. Bad weather had caused her to become unstable. A single powerful shot accelerated the collapse. It shocked everyone. Catriona was clearly an accomplice, so why was she murdered? The bullet fragments indicated the fatal wound came from a shotgun, not Kevin's pistol. Could someone else be involved? Hunting rifles are commonly used for hunting. That means there were two guns at the scene. The owner of the hunting rifle was most likely a wealthy person with a firearms license. This made Karen suspect Sinclair again. Adding to that, her house had been burglarized earlier, and the person who hired the burglar was also hinted at as being Sinclair. So what exactly did he want? Karen questioned Sinclair. She believed he was the biggest beneficiary of the current situation. He was the only one who could afford to pay the kidnappers such a large sum of money, but he only cared whether the police would find Adam's remains when they found Catriona's body. He insisted he had absolutely nothing to do with the kidnapping, but Karen didn't believe him. To force him to tell the truth, she decided to touch the most vulnerable part of his heart. She took out a picture of Adam, now named Gabriel. He was wanted by the police for saving migrants from drowning on the beach. The moment he saw the picture, Sinclair's face showed an extremely complex expression. Then he revealed the truth he had been hiding. Catriona's death had nothing to do with him, as he was with his wife at the hospital for a prenatal checkup, but perhaps it was God's punishment. He had lost his child. In fact, he had long suspected Catriona's involvement in the kidnapping because he had received a third blackmail letter. No one knew about his relationship with Catriona unless he himself revealed it. Therefore, he was extremely confused. Mr. Grant also knew about this. Mr. Grant told Sinclair to prepare cash under the guise of a charity donation and instructed him not to mention it to anyone. Mr. Grant decided to go to the scene and use the money to get Adam back. Sinclair later learned that Grant had decided to go to the scene and use money to exchange for his grandson. After the ransom was paid, Catriona left. Therefore, everyone believed that Catriona and Adam had gone somewhere to live. Sinclair's hiring someone to steal Karen's work notebook was also at Grant's instruction. No one suspected Catriona was dead. Andy and Mick took Adam to France. They now had a large sum of money. Mick decided to raise Adam. Jason discovered that Andy's new identity was Mattia, currently in Italy, so Jason and Star immediately flew there and contacted the local police, cooperating with investigators to check Mattia's whereabouts. Mattia's ex-wife said he was in a hospital receiving cancer treatment. They then went to the hospital and finally met him. He didn't admit his true identity, but under Jason's relentless questioning, his emotions began to surface. However, since it was a hospital in Italy, the police couldn't arrest him. Andy's thoughts also drifted back 40 years. After Kevin's death, Andy harbored a deep resentment towards Catriona, and also developed a disagreement with Mick. So was Catriona's death connected to him? Mick quickly received a call from Andy saying that the police had obtained information about them, including Gabrielle. Karen compiled all the clues and evidence. She believed that the person who harmed Catriona could be one of these four people, even including Mr. Grant. Karen always had a keen ability to spot overlooked clues. This was also an advantage in the investigation that her female foresight provided. She was forced to consider all possibilities. Just as Jason and his team were at a standstill, the Italian police brought news. Immediately after they found Mattia, someone had paid a huge sum of money to transfer him to a private hospital. This was enough to prove their investigation was correct. So, who was ultimately behind the obstruction? The police discovered that Andy's last phone call at the hospital was to Daniel. It's highly possible this person was Mick. Could Mick have forced Andy to remain silent? They immediately went to Mick's residence. Unexpectedly, a man with a gun appeared inside and took Star hostage. While the man was fleeing, they managed to record his license plate number. A subsequent search of the house revealed Mick had already booked a plane ticket. All the photos in the house documented Adam's upbringing. Mick didn't look at all like someone who had murdered Catriona. Based on the license plate, the police determined the man was likely a private investigator who wanted to find Mick before the police. The case became increasingly complicated. Karen had to immediately meet with Jason that night. They suspected the private investigator was hired by Mr. Grant. But why would he? When they returned to the police station, they discovered Mr. Grant was already there. It turned out that the hidden force constantly obstructing Karen and her investigation team from beginning to end was him. While Karen was still unsure what to do next, she happened to see an angry female police officer coming out. Earlier, she had seen this woman arguing with her superior. Karen understood the difficulties women faced working in the police environment, so she quickly reached an agreement with this woman. Thanks to the help of this female officer, the investigation made progress. Karen went to Grant's residence and learned that he was there to find his nephew. The private investigator who arrested her was the one he hired. But faced with such a wealth of incriminating evidence, he remained incredibly calm. Compared to the crimes he was concealing, these things were nothing. Earlier, Karen had asked a reporter to investigate Catriona. This person found a letter written by Catriona to a reporter in the archives of a major newspaper. However, shortly afterward, Mr. Grant called the newspaper to forbid them from publishing the story. He also forced the reporter to sign a confidentiality agreement agreement, along with a hush money payment. Therefore, the conflict between Catriona and her father is undoubtedly directly related to his business empire. Further investigation uncovered a series of old articles related to his business. As a mining tycoon, during the 1984 strike, Grant used violence to suppress miners, resulting in the deaths of 3 men and injuries to many others. He also concealed numerous instances of corruption within the company, such as the illegal dumping of toxic waste. As part of the Grant family's business empire, this became a symbol of his capitalist violence, outwardly a legitimate business, but in reality a tool for suppressing power. This was one of the motives behind Catriona's kidnapping plan. She wanted to expose her father's collusion with the police during the strike. Karen understood that she absolutely had to find Mick before Mr. Grant, but at this point, they were completely cornered and at a dead end. Just then, Jason received a call from the police force cooperating with them, providing a crucial location clue. Mick had gone to find Gabrielle. At that moment, he was nearly shot dead. Luckily, he managed to escape from Gabrielle's house just in time. When Karen learned of the shooting, she immediately understood that they had to speed up their search for Mick. The group quickly surrounded Gabrielle's hiding place. Just as they were about to capture him, Mick appeared. He was completely unaware that the police hadn't come to arrest him, but his father, he knew nothing about his true identity. He had never imagined that Mick wasn't his biological father. His biological father was a high-ranking executive in Grant's corporation. He is the legitimate heir to the entire empire. Mick was once suspected of murdering Catriona, but in reality, he loved her deeply. Through his account, the whole truth was finally revealed. Karen immediately led her men to arrest the Grant couple as they were preparing to board a plane to flee. When arrested, the mother confessed that she was the one who killed Catriona. Finally, the truth was completely revealed. That night, Mr. Grant brought the money to the meeting place. He knew it was all his daughter's doing and only wanted to help them carry out their plan. His sole purpose was to bring his grandson back. But unexpectedly, after receiving the money, Catriona returned to the cave. Mr. Grant heard gunshots and the sound of falling rocks echoing in the cave. His driver rushed to the cave entrance to chase after them and found that the car had long since left. But he didn't know that the person who fired the shots was Catriona's mother. She had secretly followed her husband to the cave. For safety, she took a shotgun and sneaked in through the back of the cave. She saw her daughter and Mick. She couldn't believe her daughter had staged her own kidnapping. She tried to save her daughter, but in the chaos, she accidentally fired her gun and killed her. Then the cave collapsed, but she didn't know that her daughter had died at her own hands. For years, the two of them deceived themselves into believing that their daughter was living the life she wanted. Mr. Grant tried to conceal the truth, because behind it was not just a simple kidnapping, but also involved political mechanisms, class conflict, media ethics, and power struggles. But the past never truly disappears. It only lurks beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to surface. Mick lost the woman he loved most. He chose to raise Gabrielle. When faced with her biological father and his enormous business empire, Gabrielle ultimately chose to return to Mick. This 40-year quest for the truth led Grant to realize that the most dangerous thing wasn't the secrets of the past, but the people still alive who were willing to pay any price to protect them. But that still couldn't stop her from pursuing the truth and remaining steadfast in her pursuit of justice. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.